Thank you for tuning in to CITR 101.9 FM. You're listening to Democracy Watch, the News Collective's weekly hour-long news report, bringing you alternative and undercovered current affairs coverage from Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. I'm Zoe Power.
I'm Sam Jones.
I'm Christina Song.
And I'm Alex DeBoer. Andy Laidman is also here, but she is not at a mic. So it's Thursday, September 13th at 5:03 p.m. We almost started on time. We're broadcasting from UBC's Vancouver campus on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people. So today on Democracy Watch, we're going to start out with an interview with Vancouver pollster Mario Canseco. Mario is a former journalist. He graduated from the UBC School of Journalism and the current president of Research Co., a polling company that specializes in public opinion research. So yesterday, myself and another News Collective member, Adeline Pang, sat down with Mario in our studio to discuss recent trends in voter confidence. This is based on a poll that came out on Tuesday. Mario gives us his perspective on why voters have more confidence in the Green Party and independent candidates than Vancouver's more established parties like the NPA and Vision.
After we hear that interview, we are going to go to a short interview with City Hall reporter and UBC journalism professor Frances Bula. Frances gave News Collective member Alex DeBoer her thoughts on Vancouver's newest mayoral candidate, Connie Fogal. As of today, Connie Fogal, the wife of former longtime councillor Harry Rankin, joined the race for mayor as part of a civic group called Idea Vancouver. Currently, Idea Vancouver has no social media presence, but maintains a YouTube channel with exactly 6 videos. In addition to being against rezoning, Fogal hopes to stop drug cartels and to curtail gambling. A huge concern in Vancouver, I'm sure. Not only that, she attributes the power of global cartels to their use of advanced technology from down spaceships. Stay tuned for this entertaining interview.
You read that right.
And last but not least, we will be ending the show with an original report from last night's Sauder candidate panel on housing policy. From the lavish halls of the Fairmont Hotel's Star Sapphire Ballroom, CITR's News Collective brings you the highlights of housing policy as expressed by our city's top party leaders and independent candidates. So let's go to our first piece. Here's Mario Canseco as interviewed by Alex DeBoer and Adeline Pang.
I have been doing public opinion research since 2003, looking more than anything at elections around the world, particularly Canada, United States, Britain. And I started my own company back in April. It's called Research Co. And we'll be taking a look at the municipal election, not only in Vancouver, but in other municipalities. And it's an exciting year. We had the election in Ontario as well. We'll have the election in Quebec. And, of course, the midterms in the United States. So it's going to be a pretty busy year for me. And I'm also a graduate of the UBC School of Journalism.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you about your latest survey, which came out yesterday, I believe. Yeah. So this survey was conducted before Ian Campbell dropped out, but a lot of people have been commenting on how his departure from the mayoral race makes way for perhaps Adrian Carr to run for mayor or just the Greens to surge in popularity. However, the survey was done before he actually dropped out. So I'm just wondering how much this survey is actually relevant to his departure or vice versa.
Well, what we were looking into was votes for council, which are very different. You might have a situation where somebody votes for a mayoral candidate for a party and then don't vote for anybody from that particular party when it comes to council. We thought it was a good opportunity to look into this issue and try to figure out what's happening with all the independents. And the level of support for the traditional parties was fairly low. I mean, you have 30% people saying that they would consider voting for Vision, 30% who would say they would consider voting for the Nonpartisan Association, 32% for COPE. So those are fairly low numbers when you compare them with how many people want to vote for independents and Greens. Now, the situation with Adrian Carr is unique. In the last election, she was the top vote getter in the city with 41%. Now we have 46% of people saying that they would consider voting for Green candidates. So this definitely bodes well for her chances of re-election. As a mayoral candidate, it's a little bit more complex because you wouldn't have the situation where, let's say for the sake of argument, you're a very partisan voter who will give 4 votes for council to Vision, and then your 5th vote will go to the Greens, and then you give the others to some other party. So one of the ways in which Adrian benefits from this is by being the 6th or 7th choice for people who vote definitely for a specific councillor from a specific party. So
right. So you're saying that she's not many people's, or she's not most people's first choice, but she is one of their choices.
Right. And I think this is definitely part of the situation that led her to do so well in the last election. One of the difficulties that they have right now is they have 4 candidates running for council. Maybe having 2 or 3 would be a little bit easier. But it's been difficult to try to figure out what is going to happen with council for 2 reasons. I mean, one of them is the emergence of new parties. You have one city that is running more candidates than the last time when they only ran 1. You have the return of COPE with more candidates running for more things. We have Yes Vancouver, we have Pro Vancouver, we have Coalition Vancouver, and we have a large number of independents who are running for office and are very well known. I mean, people like Erin Shum, people like Adrian Crook, Sarah Blyth. I mean, these are people who are considered leaders in the community and could conceivably do well. And I think that's one of the reasons for the high number of residents who say, I would vote for independent candidates. Now, whether all of those votes are going to go to one of them still remains to be seen.
Right. But with the Green Party itself, aside from independents, why do you think, I don't know how much you can comment on this subjectively, but why do you think they are on people's lists? Maybe not at the top, maybe at the bottom, but why are they included on so many voters' top, 10 picks or 5 picks?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of them is I think there's a natural reaction from the voter to try to do something different when it comes to council. It's been dominated by a single party, different parties over the past 20 years, but definitely a single party that is calling the shots, making the decisions. And that has led to a lot of residents feeling that council isn't doing really anything for their concerns. So what we've seen over the past 3 months is people saying, I want a council that is mixed. I don't want any party to get any majority whatsoever. I would like to see people working from several angles. And in that type of system, the Green Party tends to do remarkably well. You are going to be getting 1 or 2 votes for the Green candidates. Adrian Carr is very well known. I think that's one of the reasons. The other one is the fact that we've had a government in Victoria that has been operating with the support of the Greens on some things, even though they haven't agreed on everything with the NDP, but it's still functional. I mean, we were in a situation after the last election where people thought this is going to last 2 months or 2 weeks or maybe 1 year. Well, it's been more than a year. The situation has been going on steady. There hasn't been any economic collapse. We're not fighting for food on the streets like some people led us to believe. And there's still a good working relationship with the Greens and the NDP. So in a way, the voters in Vancouver are looking at a similar situation. I would like to have a mayor who is probably more progressive than conservative, but also somebody who can work well with the Greens.
Oh, that's very interesting, that perhaps what's happening on the provincial level is affecting what's happening municipally with the Green Party. Yeah, very interesting. So from all the polling you've done over the season, first of all, how many polls have you done in this municipal election season?
It's been 4, one in April, one in May, one in July. Okay. August was a crazy month because I desperately wanted to go in field, but people were away. Nobody was paying attention. And I was also hoping for a smaller number of candidates in the race, which I don't think we have. I mean, there might be a possibility of Vision Vancouver nominating somebody before Friday's deadline, so it's not going to be that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the 4 polls you have done, what are the overarching trends that you found?
Well, the one thing that is quite interesting is the number one issue by far is housing affordability. That is the thing that people are worried about. Millennials want to get into the market and have a tough time doing it. Generation Xers are maybe wanting to expand, maybe wanting to get married, start a family, and need to look to bigger places, and they can't afford them. And the baby boomers are worried, not necessarily because of the equity in their homes, but because now they are parents of millennials who are trying to figure out what they're going to be doing. and they are essentially helping out their kids with their needs. So all three generations are affected by this. Transportation is a big issue, but if you're somebody who likes to drive and wants to continue to drive, it's going to impact you more if we end up in a situation where you're bringing in some charges for congestion or anything of the sort. It's important, obviously, for the students because you got to get to school or work in a way that is palatable and easy. But it's definitely the second issue. The number one issue by far has been housing. There's also a sense from the voters, a certain sense of disenchantment with the Vision Vancouver brand. They were extremely popular. The mayor won 3 times. The first 2 elections, he had more than 50% of the vote. In the last one, he got 46%. And I think voters are looking elsewhere. There was a difficulty in trying to establish some sort of succession plan when it came to Vision Vancouver. And I think that is showing in the fact that Ian Campbell was recruited and now he's leaving, and now maybe we'll have some other candidate running in his place. But it definitely shows that the brand that was definitely a juggernaut for many years is no longer as relevant to the residents as it used to be. And with the changes in campaign finance regulations, anybody can start a party, anybody can knock on doors, anybody can become an independent candidate. That's one of the reasons for the split in the center-right more than anything. Hector Bremner wanted to be the nominee for the MPA, didn't get it, started his own party. Wai Young was flirting with the idea. Now she started her own party. The center-left split, in a way, is caused by Vision, because they said at first that the mayor was running for re-election. Then they said he wasn't. Then they said they weren't running a candidate, and those were the 2 weeks when Shauna Sylvester and Kennedy Stewart said, I want to run for office. And then Vision said, well, guess what? We thought it over. We are going to be running. And now 2 days ago they said they're not running again, and maybe 2 days from now they said they'll be running again. So it's been very confusing for the center-left, but also shows the delicate situation of trying to attach yourself to the Vision Vancouver brand. It would have been a lot easier for somebody like Kennedy Stewart or Shauna Sylvester to say, we'll run as Vision candidates. It's fine. Let's all unite. We have more in common than what separates us. But they don't want to because they know that it's a toxic brand for a large percentage of the residents.
Well, that's interesting. And so when you talk about Vision's decline in popularity and them perhaps even being a toxic brand, I wonder, is that not normal of a party that's been in power for a decade, or do you think there's a particular distaste for Vision?
Well, it's a combination of both. I think definitely after so many years in power, it's difficult to try to maintain control. I think we've seen it in the city, we've seen it in other jurisdictions as well. But there's also, it's a special situation because we have been used to the discussions about the coziness of developers with the government when the nonpartisan association is in power. And now we're having it with Vision Vancouver. They were supposed to be more progressive, looking into issues such as housing, homelessness, poverty. They made promises that couldn't be kept, even though they tried, and I think they should be lauded for their efforts. But it's difficult to try to appease a crowd that was hoping that you wouldn't become almost like a light version of the nonpartisan association. And I think that's definitely part of the problem. If you vote for something that is more meaningful, that is going to be bringing in some sort of change, you're definitely dissatisfied with the way in which things are going. And even though you've taken the big money out of politics, which is something that many British Columbians wanted to do provincially and municipally, you still have that situation of the relationship, the sponsorships, the things that are happening, and the loopholes in the legislation. Right. Nothing is stopping us right now from pulling our resources together and buying an ad that says we want you to vote for that candidate. We can do it. It's just a loophole in the law that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, you can do that as a third party and not register and spend as much as you want up until September 22nd. After that, there are some limits on the amount you can spend, but that has certainly been identified as a loophole. But yeah, it sounds like, you're saying that naturally a party that's been in power for a long time is going to, lose popularity. But in addition to that, Vision has let down voters with these unfulfilled promises. And I might add just the housing crisis that has really spread on their watch.
Well, that is definitely the one thing that is making a lot of people upset. In a way, it's an issue that can't be dealt with by one single level of government, and I think the animosity has been consistent towards all three levels of government. I think one of the problems for Vision was that whenever this conversation came about, Mayor Robertson consistently said, well, we don't have a partner in Victoria because the Liberals and Christy Clark are there. And we don't have a partner in Ottawa because Stephen Harper doesn't care about us. And suddenly you have this situation where for a year they've had Justin Trudeau in Ottawa, they've had John Horgan in Victoria, and really not a lot of stuff has happened. If anything, the activity has been coming out of Victoria with the taxes on empty houses, or particularly the new tax on high-value properties. City of Vancouver implemented its own empty homes tax, which worked out okay, and it's definitely popular with residents, but it's not enough. I think part of the problem with all of these taxes is you gotta have something to show for at the end of the year, and it's not really happening. We don't see a lot of people saying, now I can afford a house because the taxes are starting to work. It takes longer for that to happen, and that's definitely part of the problem, where if the main friends or sponsors of the ruling party were car dealers, we wouldn't be in this situation of animosity, but most of them are developers. So there's that symbiotic relationship that is making people upset.
Right. So you mentioned that currently voters are looking for something more meaningful in the candidates' platforms. Based on your experience in public opinion research, would that explain why, in terms of the rankings, when you mentioned in an article that Kennedy Stewart and Hector Bremner, they're ranked more highly in terms of voters' confidence in their being able to solve housing issues, but in terms of voter confidence in who they would put in city council, yes, Vancouver is not exactly ranked very highly. And so, in your opinion, would there be a correlation between higher voter confidence now and independence, like when people are looking for something meaningful in candidates' platforms, as opposed to their faith in a single party?
It's definitely related to the way in which the voter is going to make their decision when they actually cast their ballots. You're shunning away from the traditional parties, but you're also shunning away from the idea of a party, the idea of voting for everybody who's on the slate, even if the party is new, even if the party is young, even if the party has a lot of good characteristics. You're thinking about it more on an individual basis when it comes to the way you're going to be voting. And I think part of the situation with Yes Vancouver has been it's built around the image of Hector Bremner, and only Hector Bremner. There's not a lot of people who are very well known running with him. It's complicated because for a while it seemed that he was courting this very interesting group of people to run with him, and then suddenly there's the breakup with the NPA, he can't run again, and you have this problem, and he's a councillor, and he decides to start over. But it's almost as if it's built around him. And in a way, to me, it reminds me of the situation we had in Surrey 4 years ago with Barinder Rasoudi, a very well-known, very good platform, interesting way in which to look at things. But when you're fighting somebody like Surrey first with the backing of Diane Watts, it's going to be tough to break through. And she ends up getting around 30% of the vote in that election, but they can't get any councillors because it was only her. The level of support for the councillors was lower, and I think we may be onto a similar situation here. Even if Hector Bremner does very well in the election for mayor because everything is built around him, there's no guarantee that the people who are running in the slate are going to be elected.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this distrust of Vancouver's municipal parties, there are a few, reasons we can attribute, which you've mentioned. So, Vision's been in power for a long time, so people are dissatisfied with them. But then also we have these new campaign financing restrictions on spending, and on donations to parties, which mean that basically you have to have more of a grassroots movement. You have to do more door knocking. You can't spend as much on advertising. So in a way, these things have created almost a situation for independence, as you've mentioned, which is like the situation has been created for a ward system, but without wards.
That's a very good point. And I think part of the difficulty of this election, and I'm convinced that this election is going to be a case study for a bunch of people on political science over the next few years because it's unique. It might be easier to try to appeal to people in a specific jurisdiction instead of trying to get the votes or the number 9 or 10 or number 7 vote of all of your council votes without a system that allows you to vote for somebody in a specific area. The irony of this is we are heading into 3 months of discussions about changing the first-past-the-post system for the provincial election, and now we're discussing the idea of maybe having a first-past-the-post system for municipal elections, so it's going to be a bit confusing for the public. But in a way, it definitely makes things more complicated. I think one of the reasons that so many incumbents decided not to run is that they were not going to be having the same type of campaign they had 4 years ago, where the money that is coming from the corporations and the unions enables you to go into a war room that always has pizza and coffee, to know that your door knockers have been fed and have plenty of water and everything is fine. There's a machine that takes care of these things because the money's there. Now it's going to be completely different. You're not going to be running that type of campaign, and the door knocking is going to be crazy. People who work from home, people who stay at home most of the day, might be meeting council candidates 3 or 4 times a day, and it's a good way to go. I think it's a good way to establish that engagement. It levels the playing field. I don't think we're going to see a lot of radio advertisements that are as flashy as the ones we saw 4 years ago for both Vision and the MPA, or even anything on television, because that type of expenditure is not something that can happen with the new regulations that we have in place, unless you take advantage of the loophole and do all that you can and spend all the money from your friends and family that is not legal after September 22nd, before September 22nd.
Yeah, so with these caps on union and corporate donations and on individual donations of $1,200 to candidates, basically, like you said, it levels the playing field, right? But if you level the playing field in an electoral system that is an entire city, that's not enough money to get the word out about your particular campaign or even your party's campaign. So do you see Vancouverites demanding a change in their electoral system on the municipal level anytime soon?
I think it depends on how this works out. If we have a council where the mayor is, let's say for the sake of argument, independent, you have 2 Vision councillors, 2 NPAs, one from one city, one COPE, a couple of independents, everybody's going to have the things that they ran on and they want to get them done. If there's a way to foster all of those projects and to make sure that you make the right decisions for the city, then people will say, this is great. It's a system that operates fantastically, and it's great that we took the partisan rancor out of it. But if it doesn't, if we're heading into 4 years of stagnation, no projects, no movement, everybody fighting each other, nothing getting done through City Hall, then the answer might be, well, let's just elect people who represent specific areas. And, looking into some of the independent candidates, they are definitely popular in some areas of the city. So it would be to their benefit to, let's say for the sake of argument, you take the ridings at the federal level and say, well, these are now the wards for Vancouver, doing what Doug Ford is doing in Toronto, but smartly. And essentially saying, this is your ward, and you're not going to have to knock on doors all over the city. You can knock on doors here. You can be the candidate that is running locally. It will also enable the big parties to say, well, we should run this person here, this person there. Maybe we won't run a candidate here because we want somebody else to get elected. It turns it into more of a political calculation also as far as how much money you're going to spend in some areas. So if money is tight, this could actually be a solution for the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess, if in this civic election we do see a real mix on council, some independents, but no party with a majority, then that will be, like you say, a sort of test for perhaps implementing wards in the future. I'm also wondering, with polling that you're going to be doing in the future, are you going to be asking people about their opinions on third-party advertisers?
Yes, it's something that I want to get into. We've been discussing it for a while, partly because of the Hector Brebner billboards. His campaign claims that they don't know what is happening, but they certainly welcome the fact that somebody's talking about the same issues as they do. If my face were on a billboard, I would definitely like to know who's paying for it. I find it bizarre that he doesn't have that curiosity. But that's definitely problematic. It's not the kind of situation that you want to see, and it's a way to skirt the rules. And I don't know how much people are going to react positively to this. The reason they can do well is if the MPA vote starts to collapse, if people start looking at Ken Sim and say, well, yeah, I don't think I want that person as my mayor, then they can get a little bit of that vote, which is usually fairly high. You can get, maybe 22% of the vote if you get half of what the MPA got in the last election. But there's so many candidates running. I think that's also part of the problem. Some of that vote could go to Wai Young. Some of that vote could go to David Chen. And if that happens, then you're going to be left with a center-right core vote, which is usually around 40%, divided amongst 4 people. So it's definitely a tough undertaking.
Yeah. I think that's all I have for now.
Cool. I'll be back whenever you need me.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
People are really done with politics as usual.
But then it's all about the competition.
Every Vancouverite has their own story.
The perfect time for our alternative.
Vancouver's municipal election looms, October 20th. Do you know who's running for
City Council, School Board, Parks Board?
This is a wacky municipal election, and you're going to want to stay updated. Download Seeking Office, the newest municipal elections podcast from CITR's News Collective. Find Seeking Office on iTunes and Stitcher, or wherever you download your podcasts, starting July 3rd.
Are you looking for a volunteer opportunity that fits your schedule? Being a big sister takes less time than you think, and you can choose the volunteer opportunity that fits your life. Spend just 1 hour a week as a study buddy, tutor, or 2 hours a week as a big sister. Check out the various mentoring programs at Big Sisters of BC Lower Mainland and find a volunteer position and a little sister that will suit you to a T. Visit bigsisters.bc.ca for more information today.
And we're back. You are listening to Democracy Watch on CITR 101.9 FM. My name is Alex DeBoer. You just heard an interview with Mario Canseco, who is a pollster in Vancouver. He put out a poll on Tuesday, which showed that Vancouverites actually right now have more confidence in the Green Party and independent candidates than they do in established parties like Vision Vancouver and the NPA. So that was pretty interesting. Also, we have a couple special guests in studio with us. The News Collective has been reunited with the great Rahmatullah Sheikh.
Hello.
And RPJ.
Hi, everyone. Good to be back.
Ryan Patrick Jones. These two journalism school champions?
Radio hacks.
Are killing it. Both were working at the CBC recently. Rahmatullah, where were you also just interning?
Yeah, I was also on a fellowship program at TRT World, which is the public broadcaster of Turkey. They're headquartered in Istanbul. So I was there for 2 months. I was working on a flagship current affairs program called The Newsmakers.
Okay. So what was that? What did that entail?
Yeah, so what they do is they cover 3 big stories that have broken over the week, and they have a panel discussion on it, so sort of diving deep into the story, bringing out all the sides of the coins, and just basically delving deep into it and trying to mine things that may have been missed in radio segments or TV segments, which usually don't last more than 30 seconds.
Okay. Pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff. It was anchored by a very popular ex-Al Jazeera journalist whose name is Imran Garda. I was fanboying all over when I was working with him. And he actually gave me a signed copy of his debut novel. It's called The Thunder That Rose. It was
wow.
Yeah.
See what happens when you join the News Collective? You flourish.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan, what have you been doing? You can move that mic.
Well, I was started out as an intern at CBC Toronto in the local newsroom there.
Oh.
Mostly doing web writing at the beginning, but then I also did a bunch of radio reporting as well. So, with the hourly local news reports. And then after the 6 weeks of my internship, they hired me. So I was there for the rest of the summer. I've been, reporting from CBC for the last 5 months and, doing very similar stuff to what you do here, reporting on local news. I am a little jealous, though, because I left just as the municipal election was kicking up. Or was it? Because Doug Ford has completely thrown it upside down. But anyway, it's good to be back here where there's an election in full swing. Why don't you tell me about the election?
Oh, we will. That's a good segue, but I'm going to tack back for a sec because I would just like to say that Toronto also has a pretty interesting municipal election season.
Oh, my goodness.
Ours might be weirder.
I was quite upset, that I came back on Sunday, September 9th, which was a day before a federal court judge ruled that Premier Ford's legislation to cut the size of the Toronto Council in half was unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. And then, only a few hours later, Ford said he was going to invoke the notwithstanding clause, the first Ontario premier to ever do that. It's kind of this escape valve that was built into our Constitution that was kind of a compromise that allowed the Constitution to actually happen. Some premiers at the time in the 1980s were worried that there would be some judicial overreach. So they said there needs to be some way that a government can overrule basically the will of the judiciary. And so that's where that clause came in. It's just been a crazy news week in Toronto, so I'm a bit sad to be missing it. But
right, that is exciting. And by doing that, the notwithstanding clause, he violated the Charter of Rights.
Well, he
freedoms,
didn't
right?
violate the Charter of Rights. It's because the notwithstanding clause is included in the Charter of Rights. It's a section within the Charter that allows you to override. It allows you to pass legislation that may violate some of the other rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and you just basically have to include this clause in a law and pass it. And I mean, it's available to any provincial legislature. It's also available to the federal government.
Right.
It's been used very, very rarely.
Yeah.
Quebec used it a bunch. They kind of used it in every piece of legislation in the early 1980s as a form of protest because they didn't really enjoy the Constitution or the agreement that led to it.
They didn't quite enjoy it.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms. But it's been very rarely used by other provincial legislatures as well. So it was quite shocking that he's just willing to. And Premier Ford also said he'd be using it in the future, or he wouldn't shy away from using it in the future. So it's just an interesting time in Ontario politics, that's for sure.
What a bold man.
Strong leadership, that's what they're saying.
Strong leadership, hey? That's cool. Well, welcome back, Ryan Patrick Jones and Ramatullah Sheikh. We look forward to seeing what you guys do in the future, either with the News Collective or otherwise. But back to Vancouver's municipal politics. Things get wackier every day. So this morning, when I was on the bus searching Van Polly, hashtag Van Polly, which I do most mornings, I saw that Frances Bula, a longtime City Hall reporter, also a professor at the UBC School of Journalism, tweeted that a new mayoral candidate had entered the race. Friday is the last day you can file to run for council or as mayor. So it's really coming close to the deadline. So this new mayoral candidate is someone named Connie Fogal. And Connie is the wife of former Cope councillor Harry Rankin. You may have seen a documentary about him that came out at Doxa this year, a very good documentary called The Rankin File, which sort of explores his legacy because he was a very influential and quite a personality in Vancouver politics for a long time. Anyway, so his wife, who had been involved in COPE, but has since been involved in sort of a fringe federal party called, I think it's Canada Action Party. It comes up in this interview we're about to hear. But she is part of a new municipal group called Idea Vancouver, and this group is running her for mayor. And so the group doesn't have a website or social media, so it's actually hard to know much about them, but they do have a YouTube channel, which has exactly 6 videos, short videos of Connie talking. So Connie's quite a character, and she has some very outlandish beliefs. And we're going to play one of her YouTube videos, the audio, just so you can hear her. And then we're going to go into an interview that I did with Frances Bula, where she provides her thoughts on Connie and, whether it's unusual to have such an outlandish character, for lack of a better word, run for mayor in Vancouver. So let's go to that.
My name is Connie Fogal. I'm here representing the Idea Vancouver group who are running for the city election. It's important to raise the issue of Vancouver's shame. What is that shame? Terry Glavin documented it very well in the August issue of Maclean's, and that's the use of fentanyl in this city, the money laundering that goes along with the fentanyl through the casinos and through the real estate. The real estate is Vancouver's shame. For 50 15 years, it's gone rampant in Vancouver with uncontrolled development and in the interests of the citizens. Everything has been for the interest of the developers.
All right, that was a clip of Connie Fogal of Idea Vancouver from their YouTube channel. So let's turn now to the interview I did with Frances Bula on Connie's run for mayor. And let's see what you guys think. Thank you for chatting with me. I will not take up much of your time. As you said, you're very busy right now. Obviously, there's a lot happening. So I just wanted to chat with you briefly about Connie Fogal, who's the wife of Harry Rankin, who is an MPA counselor, and she recently...
No, he was a COPE counselor.
I'm sorry, the literal opposite.
Yeah.
he was a COPE counselor. And so she is now running for mayor with the group Idea Vancouver. So I learned about this development from your tweet today. I'm wondering, how did you learn about this?
Oh, they sent out an email to many people, so I'm sure all the reporters got it. It's just, for someone like me who's been covering politics for 25 years, like seeing that name again was, means a little bit more than maybe someone who's only been around for a few years. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Harry Rankin was a really important figure in Vancouver politics for a long time. Was his wife, Connie, involved in COPE while Harry was involved?
Yep. Mm-hmm. She's his second wife. His first wife,
yes.
Johnny, was very involved too, and she was. I can't remember if she ever ran for them, but, they were a very political couple, so they were involved in politics together. And she actually went on to be the president of a new national party called, I think, Canadian Alliance, if I'm not mistaken.
It's Canadian Action Party.
Oh, Canadian Action Party, right. So she was involved with that for a while. She was part of the anti-casino movement in Vancouver, was very active in trying to oppose that. And so she's been around politics a long time, but she has some fairly unconventional views, as some people on Twitter have alluded to.
She does indeed. So it appears from her Idea Vancouver YouTube channel, which is sort of the only platform that appears available to media and voters right now. Like, they don't have a website or any social media, from what I can tell. That on that channel, Connie is talking about the importance of ending money laundering and also stopping drug cartels. She talks a lot about drug cartels. So in these videos, Connie doesn't elaborate on the why or how these drug cartels have gained so much power, but she does get into this in an October 2014 book review she wrote, which was posted on the website henrymacau.com, and she says, and I quote, "The power and control of this planet is totally out of the hands of responsible government. It is totally in the hands of unaccountable, privatized military and industrial and banking cartels. The source of their incredible power is the extremely advanced technology at their disposal from downed spaceships, which they have co-opted, studied, and reverse engineered for decades, funded by taxpayer trillions. This is the biggest secret of all time." So I was wondering, is this kind of sort of outlandish conspiracy thinking particularly unusual for a mayoral candidate in Vancouver?
Oh, we've had some pretty interesting mayoral candidates, from Mr. Peanut to, various others. But this is a little bit unusual. As, I'll let the public judge for themselves. I'm often surprised to see what people believe in and so on. But, this is pretty out there.
Mm-hmm. So it seems unlikely that Connie Fogal will become Vancouver's next mayor, but do you think her campaign for mayor is worth paying attention to, or is it something we should kind of just laugh at and ignore?
Well, I think there are other new parties that are more worth paying attention to, who have, gotten together some fairly serious supporters. I would say, Wei Young's Coalition Vancouver. I would say Pro Vancouver, obviously Hector Bremier's Yes Vancouver. There's some new parties that have put more into this, and develop platforms that are less to do with, alien cartels and more to do with housing policy.
Right. So tomorrow, which is Friday, September 14th, is the last day candidates can file to run for council or mayor. Do you see any other surprises in the works?
Well, we're waiting to see if Vision is going to have a mayoral candidate. I was just looking at who has filed so far, and interestingly, a number of people, their names don't appear. Kennedy Stewart, Shauna Sylvester, two notable ones that aren't on the list yet. Like, there is a public list of who's filed so far. So who knows what's going to happen by tomorrow in this extremely unusual race.
Right. Are you suggesting that perhaps either Kennedy Stewart or Shauna Sylvester will be the mayoral candidate for Vision?
I don't know what I'm suggesting anymore. It's all too confusing for us, honestly. I mean, they have been pretty clear that they would not become the mayoral candidates for Vision.
Yeah.
So, it does lead me to wonder if they were holding off to see if they would bail out before, and that's why they didn't file. But I really don't know.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you go back to reporting, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll run back to my reporting.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your time, Francis.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. You just heard an interview that I did. My name's Alex DeBoer with journalist and professor at UBC, Francis Beulah. So, it was interesting. Basically, Francis alerted me to a website that had a book review by Connie Fogal, in which she, as the quote I read in the interview, she discussed the damage alien technology was causing to our planet through using banking cartels and drug cartels who have access to this alien technology. I don't know. So it's interesting. Something else interesting that she said is that a bunch of the mayoral candidates haven't actually filed their candidacy yet. So that's interesting, right? Because it's possible one of them, like Kennedy Stewart or Shauna Sylvester, might join with Vision or drop out. I don't know. They have till tomorrow. So probably going to be a big news day tomorrow, because we're also probably going to see someone from Vision join and run as their mayoral candidate. So we're going to go to a really short break. You're listening to Democracy Watch on CITR 101.9 FM. We have a really great piece coming up after this break. It is we're hearing the highlights from a housing policy panel last night with local municipal election candidates. So, nothing could be more fun. We'll be right back.
The AIDS Vancouver helpline is here to help. Open from 9 to 4, Monday to Friday, the helpline answers questions about HIV and safer sex. Call to find medical support in your area without giving your name. Run by volunteers, the helpline is one of the many programs from AIDS Vancouver combating the HIV epidemic in the Lower Mainland. While not medical professionals, our volunteers answer your questions confidentially and anonymously. The helpline number is 604-696-4666, or contact us at aidsvancouver.org.
And we're back. That was, as promised, a very short break. You are listening to Democracy Watch on CITR 101.9 FM. So I'm joined in studio by a bunch of the News Collective, including two of our reporters who went down to the Fairmont Hotel. Is that what it is? Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel?
Yeah, specifically the Pacific Rim one. Right on the waterfront, Canada Place,
key distinction?
valet parking. Beautiful establishment.
Beautiful. Okay. So you were at a housing policy panel. Can you tell us what this event was about and who was there? And by the way, I'm joined by Zoe Power and Sam Jones. I don't think I said your names, did I?
You have now.
I have now.
It's
Great.
on the record.
Will one of the two of you tell me what happened at this event, please?
So apart from us being there, we were also joined by, there was sort of one candidate from each of the major parties who are running in this year's election, as well as the independents who are running for mayor representing themselves. So we had Christine Boyle from One City, who's running for council, Hector Bremner with Yes Vancouver, and David Chen with Pro Vancouver, mayoral candidates. We had Pete Fry of the Green Party, who still aren't running anyone for the mayor's position, Ken Sim of the NPA, as well as Kennedy Stewart, who's running independently for mayor. We also had Jean Swanson, who's running for council with COPE, Diego Cardona running for council with Vision, and independent Shauna Sylvester. So this lineup was sort of asked a series of questions by the moderator was Tom Davidoff, this kind of big name in economics and specifically in real estate economics in Vancouver. And yeah, they were put questions from the panel who were moderating as well as a few questions from the audience.
Okay.
And it was in a really kind of strange establishment, if you want to tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the ballroom in
general.
Wait,
hold on.
No problem.
Let's see. Yes?
Oh yeah, so the Sapphire Star Ballroom.
The Sapphire Star Ballroom?
Yes, a beautiful establishment complete with ambient lighting, water that was served out of beautiful stainless steel pitchers, which sat at every table. Plenty
Many
of
types
wine.
of cheese,
Yeah,
a very
many
incredible
types of
cheese platter.
Yes. Everyone was dressed beautifully. I felt like a bum. It was an absolutely a very posh event, for sure. Yeah.
Huh. What was the format and tone of the panel?
So in general, despite it being this very lavish setting, it was kind of a strict panel. It felt at times a little bit like an economics exam. But in general, each question was asked of all of the candidates. So there'd be a question, and then they all took turns starting, and each of them would have to give, normally in 90 seconds or less, their answer to the questions that were asked. In some cases, 45 seconds or less. And they had a couple of lightning rounds as well, where candidates were only allowed to say one word in response to a question, including the first question.
Yeah, which I'll explain. So early on in the panel, as was described by Tom, a Kobayashi Maru nightmare scenario was posed to the candidates about
which is a Star Trek reference.
Which is a Star Trek reference.
It's meant to be an impossible test to there's no solution, but it tests your courage.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, exactly. Is posed to the candidates about an underutilized piece of land deep inside a residential school zone. The idea is that neighbors don't want this land to be developed into townhomes. The other possibility is that they will be single family, which neighbors would be fine with. Tom Davidoff, the moderator, of course, asking the question uses the criticism to explain an example of the criticism to explain the problem the neighbors are having, that the project would be like taking a chainsaw to the heart of the neighborhood. Every candidate answered yes, except Ken Sim and David Chen, with reservation to the question of whether or not they would build the townhomes.
Okay, so sorry. In some, everyone said that they would build the housing despite the neighborhood being unhappy, except for Ken Sim and Hector Bremner.
No, except for Ken Sim and David Chen.
And David Chen.
Yeah, but David Chen expressed reservation. He kind of said, I wish there was an option C. Got shut down by Tom right away and said no.
Okay.
Yeah, we did actually
so
have
that's interesting.
Audio from that question that people could listen to as an example of sort of the ruthless tone of this debate. It was kept very on topic.
All right, well, let's go to that.
So the difficult decision, and I need a one-word answer, yes or no. Are you going to vote for the project or oppose it? An answer that's not okay is I want to negotiate again. There's no negotiate again. Either vote yes and you get the townhomes, or no and you get the single family. So we'll do a little roll call. Hector Bremner, yes.
Absolutely yes.
All right. Next door, we have Jean Swanson running for council from COPE, and I should say Hector's for mayor. Jean Swanson, candidate for council. How do you vote?
Yes, but we have...
yes, okay, very good. No buts. Okay. Pete Fry, Green Party for council.
I guess you'll have to hand me a chainsaw.
Chainsaw, all right, 3 for 3. Okay.
Yes.
Diego Cardona from Vision Vancouver.
Yes.
Ken Sim, NPA for mayor.
No.
No. Shauna Sylvester, independent for mayor.
Yes, and I'm glad to see you used my affordability mechanism and how to get to that.
Yes. Oops, sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. Christine Boyle, One City for Council.
We need more family housing.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
All right. Well, that was the clip.
You'll notice in that round of questions that the moderator held the politicians accountable to the questions being asked. Nadia Stewart of Global BC and Ian Bushfield of the Cambie Report also were very serious about that as well. The people who put this panel together indeed took it very seriously.
Yeah, although you can still see when you're listening to that audio something that repeatedly happened throughout the night, which is that despite the attempts to keep people very much on topic, there was a whole bunch of stunts that people pulled out in order to try to list their key policy names as well as their running mates, to the point where they were being told to sort of shut up as soon as they started doing that by some point in the debate.
Right.
But we've got a second piece of audio that we'll play for you, which was a prime example of that. It was in answer to one of the first question that was asked in detail of the panel. So the question which Ian Bushfield posed was, how many new units of housing would you build if you were elected to council? And Hector Bremner used that as an opportunity to announce a new policy.
So live tonight, while we are sitting here talking about housing policy, the most substantive plan in 91 years will be released. We are operating in Vancouver on a plan that was introduced in 1927. It was written by Harlan Bartholomew and another man named James Payton, who was a Vancouver City Councillor. Their approach was both economic and racial segregation. In 91 years, we've done a lot better than that, but we're left with the architecture of this. Until we address the fact that 76% of our land is exclusionary to middle-class families, we will not be able to build any of these units. And that's what we're going to do. Immediately begin the consultation of a citywide plan that will replace the Bartholomew Plan and set us upon a path for success for the next 91 years and beyond. And within that, we have already committed within a 3-year market correction.
Okay, that was interesting. So essentially, Hector used this opportunity to pitch or promote his new housing plan. So could you tell me, he's commenting on how old our zoning is and outdated and how it is actually meant to segregate. Can you tell me what's actually in his plan that would change this?
Yeah, okay, so we tried to ask him this as well. We did head up to him after the debate to actually ask him the same question. And we do have a little bit of tape that we can play for that, but he did certainly keep things pretty vague, pretty airy, a lot about the process of planning and what's important to him in terms of approving and thinking about new development rather than the actual details. Although the plan was released, live during the debate, so more details of it are online.
It was great. So happy to answer any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have a question, which is that you answered the first question with what looked like a very, very heavy-looking document slammed down in front. Can you tell us more about what this action plan is? Where did it come from? What are the key points?
The action plan has come from extensive consultation over the last year as a Vancouver City Councillor. I have spent an inordinate amount of time with our staff, academics, the industry, advocates, everyone. Polling, studies, and a tremendous amount of research. And what I'm so proud of with this plan is that, and I was just saying to someone that this is not what you would normally expect from a political party. This is actually something you've typically seen from advocacy groups. This is something you've typically seen from academic research. This is a real substantive, bold plan for the next 100 years for the city of Vancouver. And it contemplates bringing in a new citywide plan, a radical new approach to the way that we approve housing, taking an all-of-above approach and rehumanizing, as we were saying, rehumanizing our neighborhoods. So a lot of really bold, innovative thinking in here, from putting a chief economist in the city to drive development planning decisions as much as building form advocates, because we, of course, just zoned Cambie Phase 3 at Council, and it's the size of North Vancouver, and we literally made the decision. I was astonished as I was sitting there. hearing from staff that we had not done business case studies on how the neighborhoods would actually function, who would actually live there. None of this was contemplated. It was arbitrary to say, well, I guess we should have townhomes here, this FSR should be there, and so I think it was high time to put families, economy, and how neighborhoods function back at the center of city planning.
Okay, don't know what his plan is.
So this theme, you will hear this constantly. This is not what you'd expect from a political party, like we just heard from Hector. This was a recurring theme throughout the night, and we have Shauna, for example, saying something similar.
I'm also using LinkedIn because I figure I'm applying for a job. So I'm doing something that's never been done before in a campaign because I'm not acting like a politician to begin with. So a politician never puts out their policies. Elections are not times to talk about policies, but I'm doing that. And asking people for personal feedback. So that if people don't feel comfortable giving it to me on Facebook or in Twitter or whatever, they can tell me personally. And I have been asking people what they think is working, is not working in the city, and I've got hundreds and hundreds. So crowdsourcing ideas, crowdsourcing things. People who work at the city can tell me what's going on. It's been fascinating. So LinkedIn, find me, tell me what you think. I'd love to hear.
Okay. So that was Shauna Sylvester.
Yeah, so that was Shauna Sylvester hitting on this familiar theme of sort of trying to set herself out from the crowd by being not like the other politicians, which is something that we had a ton during the debate, probably something that has a lot to do with all of these new parties that are running this year, or non-parties, parties that do not call themselves parties.
Indeed.
As well as all the independents in the race. There was a lot of emphasis on sort of this idea of not being like the establishment, really trying to set themselves apart from the questionable vision record of the last 10 years.
Right.
But they did actually occasionally talk about policy as well. So in terms of the questions that they were asked, one thing that we noticed throughout the night was that a lot of the candidates, almost the majority of candidates, used this language of housing being a human right or a universal human right, which is something that the sort of language we associate with COPE's policies of the last few years, but it was very much sort of a consensus position in the candidate last night, in the debate last night.
One candidate in particular has been saying that for a long time, Jean Swanson of COPE. I got a chance to interview her briefly. So, you talked about housing being a universal human right, and I think that's very interesting. What I'd like to know is, where do you think that right begins and ends? So how much housing does each person have a right to? And if there's a second question I could ask directly after that I think is very related. Some people, when they hear that, they respond with a criticism, well, housing, whether or not it's a right or not, people don't have a right to live anywhere, and they should live places they can afford. How would you respond to that criticism? I'm very curious about that.
So what would I think is the bare minimum for our society? I think probably 350 square feet, a self-contained bathroom and kitchen, and rent that's no more than 30% of your income. That would be it. And I think for this city that's about the bare minimum that people should be entitled to. To say that people should only live where they can afford, that doesn't work if you're on welfare or you're on disability or you have no income. You can't afford anything in this city. So something has to happen so that those people can have houses, because they'll die if they don't. And not only will they die, but it will be more expensive for taxpayers because of health and other costs. So, I think it's really important to provide housing as a human right. So did the UN in the Universal Declaration on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights that Canada signed in 1976.
So I was very impressed by how precise her answer was. No dancing around it at all. And also the amount of bases hit. the taxpayer, the fatality of homelessness, international policy. It was really quite refreshing, I have to say.
Right. So it might be fair to say that although all the parties are pivoting towards the rhetoric that housing is a human right, which formerly was something that maybe only COPE was willing to say, COPE, as represented in this case by Jean Swanson, is still the one articulating the most kind of concise metrics for what that actually means in terms of policy.
Absolutely. Jean Swanson was very much prepared to answer the question of where does it begin and end, and did so quite eloquently and quite precisely, indeed.
Yeah, I would say there was a few things that kind of became like consensus positions during the debate. That one was one of them. People saying that they were definitely going to end homelessness, as was Gregor Robertson 10 years ago, was definitely another one of those. And I think, Shauna Sylvester's kind of buzzword of gentle density became a consensus position as well. People kept referring to that idea throughout the night.
Would people say that term as well, or did that belong to her?
Yeah, like by the end of the debate, it was being picked up and thrown around by a few other people. Pete Fry definitely used that word. I think Diego picked it up as well. So we're really into, gentle density. Sounds a lot nicer than gentrification. But yeah,
Indeed.
despite these kind of like consensus positions, you could also see some of the really like standard political divisions occurring across party lines toward the end. So the debate finished with a lightning round where people weren't given 90 seconds to voice their opinions, but they were just told sort of to take a position on a couple of different policies. So the last two of those, one of them was about increasing the empty homes tax, and one of them was about whether Vancouver needs a progressive or a mansion tax. And on both of those positions, every single candidate answered yes, except Hector Bremner and Ken Sim, which seems, like a pretty standard kind of right of centre party division. Of course, Hector Bremner used to be a member of the NPA, who Ken Sim is running for. So we actually took the time after the debate finished to ask Ken Sim about what it is that sets him and Hector Bremner apart, given that they ended up on the same side of so many of those policy questions.
And unfortunately, we are out of time and are being kicked out of the studio. Zoe, could you summarize what he said in like 5 seconds? And then this content will be available on our podcast, Seeking Office, for those who are waiting with bated breath.
So pretty much Ken Sim's answer to this question was, the difference between us and Yes Vancouver is that we actually listen, which was a very sassy response.
All right. Well, that's it for Democracy Watch. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to CITR 101.9 FM. And now we have no dead air.